I would like to thank Established Titles for sponsoring today's video. Established Titles are a project based on historic Scottish custom, where landowners are referred to as lords and ladies. What Established Titles does is it allows you to buy your own small plot of land in Scotland from about 1 square foot. After this, you'll officially be a lord or lady. Established Titles plant a tree with every order and work with global charities, One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, to support global reforestation efforts. They have all sorts of packages. There is even a couples pack, and you can even allow your whole family to join with the Family Titles pack. Just to clarify, this is an official title of ladyship or lordship, where you can officially change your name to lord or lady and put it on things such as your credit cards or airplane tickets. Established Titles have told me that the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my own briefcase plot, or just a short walking distance. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or lady, we could build our own kingdom. It makes a great surprise gift that everyone will be talking about. Established Titles is actually running a massive sale right now. Plus, if you use the code briefcase, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/briefcase to get your gift now and help support the channel. Today we are looking at a case from the middle of the 20th century, so sit back as we go to Panama. The small country of Panama is located in Central America, in what is considered a very strategic point. For many centuries, the Panama Strait was thought to be the perfect location for vessels to pass from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans. The earliest record regarding the idea of constructing a canal across the Isthmus of Panama dates back to 1534, when the King of Spain, Charles V, ordered a survey for a route through the Americas in order to ease the voyage for ships travelling between Spain and Peru. The French began construction there in 1880, led by the famed canal engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps. An attempt was made to build a sea-level canal. Despite the advances in technology, the project was besieged with unexpected issues, as well as the difficulties in excavating the rugged terrain. Many workers died from tropical diseases, such as malaria and yellow fever. Eventually, due to all the challenges of financing and building such a large-scale project, the attempt was abandoned. Although the canal was unfinished, some construction had been completed, and in 1902, US President Theodore Roosevelt purchased the French assets in the canal zone of Panama after managing to negotiate a deal with the new government. Following the country's announcement of its independence from Colombia on the 6th of November 1903, the United States recognized the Republic of Panama, and on November the 18th, the Habano-Varilla Treaty was signed. The treaty allowed for the construction of the canal and US sovereignty over a strip of land 10 miles wide and 50 miles long on either side of the canal zone. In this zone, the US would build a canal, then administer, fortify and defend it in perpetuity. Construction began in 1904, and 10 years later, on the 15th of August 1914, the Panama Canal officially opened. At this time, it was the most expensive construction project in US history. Silvano Ward Brown was born on the 19th of September 1941 into a poor Panamanian family. They lived together in the coastal city of Puerto Armuellas, in the province of Chiriquí. The area is notorious for its outstanding natural beauty, crystal blue sea, and high peaks. The industry of the region was predominantly based around agriculture, and for decades the surrounding fields had cultivated bananas and other fruits, which was then exported worldwide. Many fruit companies set up businesses, which provided much work for the local people. Silvano had a somewhat idyllic childhood. Puerto Armuellas was a small but beautiful city that sat next to the Pacific Ocean. He had many friends and attended the local primary school, where teachers remarked on his good behaviour and academic progress. His father worked in a fruit company, and although he was not paid a large salary, the family were able to live a modest but secure life. Sadly, this all came to an abrupt end when Silvano was just 12 years old. His parents separated, and he was then brought up solely by his mother. Suddenly his behaviour started to change. He would miss school and stay out, not returning home until very late. After a while, he dropped out of school altogether. He tried to work, but found it difficult to accept instruction and was unable to hold down a job. So instead of working, he started committing minor offences. He was soon apprehended and placed into a juvenile detention centre. In 1959, and now 18 years old, Silvano left the detention centre. He decided that he needed to be somewhere other than Panama. Since he was aged 12, his life had gone in the wrong direction, and he thought it would be better if he tried to find his way somewhere else. He set off to Panama City. This was the capital and the largest city in the country. He had been told by his mother and the friends who he had made in the detention centre that Panama City would offer far more opportunities for him to find employment. He would then be able to start to live a respectable, law-abiding life. The Panama Canal had created many jobs, not just working within the canal zone, but also around Panama City. Many of these were very labour-intensive, including working in construction and on the docks unloading cargo. As Silvano was young, fit and strong, he would have been ideal for this type of work. There was competition, however, as since the canal's construction, Panama had attracted workers from many countries who were eager to benefit from all the work that was required in the many areas of the canal's operation. Silvano settled into life in Panama City and seemed happy. It was a very cosmopolitan place, which had benefited from much investment. It was next to the ocean, with a lovely promenade, and the old town was adorned with colonial architecture. Silvano soon started to look for work, but it wasn't as easy as he thought. He had not completed school, so didn't have the basic requirements for many of the available positions. He did obtain some casual work in the city, but the pay was very low. He wanted to have a comfortable life, but the money he earned was barely enough for him to be able to pay for his food and the rent for the room where he lived. In order to supplement his low income, he started to break into houses. He found this very easy. He had often done it back in Panama. He carried a sharp knife and other small tools in order for him to be able to force an entry, but often he didn't need to use them, as windows and doors were left unlocked. For a while, his return to his life of crime went relatively smoothly, and he felt that as he was only breaking into the more affluent homes in the city, the people who he robbed could afford to be parted from a bit of money and jewellery. However, as he robbed more houses, his confidence grew. In 1959, Silvano was wandering the streets in the San Francisco area of Panama City to try and see what homes looked empty, so he could make an entry and do a swift robbery. He decided to break into a particularly elegant residence and managed to get in without difficulty. After a brief look around, he made his way upstairs. The money and jewellery were usually to be found in the bedrooms. However, unbeknownst to Silvano, the house was occupied. As he was in a bedroom, he heard footsteps. He tried to hide behind the silk curtains, but the young lady whose bedroom he had been robbing spotted him near the window. She was 18 years old, and her name was Señorita Paula Caballero. She was in her nightclothes, as she had been getting ready for bed. She instantly started to scream, but her screams did not last very long. Silvano took his knife and stabbed the young lady on the left side of her chest. Although she tried to defend herself, he was too strong. She tried to move away from him, but her wounds were too deep. She then collapsed on the floor of her bedroom. Silvano left the house and started running as fast as he was able. He thought that he had escaped as it was dark, and he did not think that there had been anyone about. Señor and Señora Caballero were very quick to try and help their daughter, but tragically her wounds were too deep, and as her mother cradled her in her arms, she died. Señor Caballero called the police. Being from an affluent neighbourhood and with influential connections, the investigation became very important for the Panama City police. The streets were patrolled, and many people were asked to cooperate to try and find the culprit of this horrendous crime. 2 witnesses came forward who had been walking in the neighbourhood that evening. They said that they saw a young man running near the Caballero family home and were able to describe him to the police. Other people had mentioned Silvano's name. This was because they knew that he wasn't working very much, but he always seemed to have money. The police apprehended him, and they were able to trace items found in his room to the murdered girl. They also learned of his previous criminal record. He was charged with murder, and at the subsequent trial found guilty and sentenced to 12 years in prison. At the time of the murder, he was still just 18 years old, so served the first 2 years of his sentence in a youth prison centre before being sent to Cobar Island for the remaining 10 years. Once in prison, he was examined by a medical and forensic psychiatrist named Jose Khaled, whose findings were not very positive. He said that Silvano showed no regret for what he had done, even though he had killed an innocent and defenceless young girl. He added that this was not uncommon, as when Silvano was young, he had committed minor criminal offences, for which he was apprehended and served time in juvenile detention. But his criminal ways had continued, and he had become a cold-blooded killer who showed absolutely no remorse towards his victim. The psychiatrist emphasised that Silvano could kill again if he was ever released, and would be a danger to the wider community. He had seen other offenders that would commit another murder, without much thought for the consequences. In 1971, Silvano completed his sentence, and despite the forensic psychiatrist's concerns, he was released back into society. By now he was 30 years old, and had said that he was looking forward to a life of freedom, and one that was free of crime. As he had spent much of his youth inside a prison cell, he decided to go to Colón, which is a city where the ships enter the Panama Canal on the Caribbean side. He found work on board a ship called the Spanish Man. The ship made small journeys, and he was sometimes away for a few days at a time. His life was peaceful, and he made new friends. When at sea, he also managed to save money, as he was living and eating on the ship. 2 years later, on the 7th of June 1973, the ship arrived back at the Colón docks, and the crew disembarked. It was late, 1:20 in the morning, and there were only a few people still around the docks. Silvano collected his car from the parking area and left with a fellow worker who had agreed to give a lift home. Once she had dropped him off, he continued towards his apartment. It was Thursday, and the streets around the city were quiet. Silvano was not tired, so decided to go and see if he could find a lady companion for the night. As he was driving through the city centre, passing the National Bank, he noticed a woman walking around looking for clients. It was about 2 a.m. He observed her and drove towards the old canal zone, where he knew there were often other working girls. However, he did not see any, so turned around and drove back towards the National Bank. He saw a 22-year-old young lady named Dalila Gaitan-Troya. They agreed on a price, and she got in his car. He then drove her back to his apartment. She told him that she was in a hurry, as she thought that she may be able to fit in another client that night. However, Silvano wanted to take his time and enjoy the young lady's company. He told her that he needed more time than her usual clients, but Dalila wasn't too happy about this and started to mock him. He then became quite angry. He asked her to give the money back, but she refused and then slapped him. Silvano lost his temper. He was very angry and punched her. He then proceeded to strangle her, first with his hands and then with a sweater. When he had calmed down, he realised that the young lady was dead. Silvano then picked up the body and placed her on the back seat of his car. He drove until he found a suitable place where he could throw away her wallet and shoes. Then, without much thought, he undressed her and left her on the side of the road. The next day, the body of the young 22-year-old, Dalila Gaitan-Troya, were found by a couple who were walking along a path in the San Miguelito district of the city. A police investigation was launched. 1 week later, on the 19th of June 1973, the naked body of another young woman was found in Colón. Her name was Señorita Rosa Maria Gomez, a 23-year-old Colombian who had come to Panama looking for work. She was found at the start of the jungle area, near the old canal zone, on the Chilibre and Transismica intersection. Again, Silvano was responsible for the murder, as a little more than a week after he had brutally killed Dalila Gaitan-Troya, he had gone out looking for another young lady to entertain him. He agreed a price, and the young lady told him that her name was Rosa. He took her to his apartment, but got frustrated as he said that he could not concentrate and suggested that they went for a walk. Rosa obliged. She did not want to rush him. On their return, he was unable to perform. Naively, she made a teasing comment, and this infuriated Silvano. The next day, her body was discovered by the side of the road. She had been strangled. Police detective Dario Orosamena was assigned to the case, and he soon realised that the murders of the two sex workers who had been strangled and left by the side of the road were linked. In the knowledge that Silvano Ward Brown, a convicted murderer, lived in the city, On the 29th of June 1973 he arrested him. The subsequent forensic search of his apartment found evidence that both young ladies had been there. His hair was also found on a sash that he had placed on Rosa's neck. When the evidence was presented to him, Silvano confessed to the crimes. He was then charged for the murder of Dalila Gaitan Troya and Rosa Maria Gomez. His trial was a formality. He pleaded guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Silvano Ward Brown was released in June 1993 at the age of 52 after serving his full sentence. He went on to work as a security guard and to live with family members in Panama City. In a subsequent psychiatric examination, he was described to be a cold and calculated individual with a high IQ. He was also diagnosed as an immoral psychopath mixed with a perverse sexual psyche, whose condition led him to act out his frustration in a violent and murderous way. In 1994, the Panama Canal was recognised by the American Society of Civil Engineers as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. The canal hosted its 1 millionth passing ship in September 2010. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next Brief Case